Hello and welcome. Tonight's story, The Signal, follows a group of amateur radio enthusiasts who stumble upon a mysterious broadcast that defies all explanation. What begins as a simple curiosity soon spirals into a desperate race against time, as they discover the signal isn't a message, but a countdown to a terrifying, world-altering event. Settle in. Turn down the lights and prepare yourself for The Signal.
The static was a constant, a gray noise ocean that filled Leo's headphones night after night. It was the sound of the universe whispering to itself, a cosmic shush that usually brought him a strange sense of peace. He sat in his cramped basement, the only light coming from the green and amber glow of his equipment. Racks of transceivers, oscilloscopes, and spectrum analyzers lined the concrete walls, a high-tech altar for his lonely worship. At 26, Leo had more friends in the ether than he did in the city of Oakhaven. Tonight, the ocean was different. At 02:17 a.m., a ripple disturbed the static. It wasn't the familiar crackle of a lightning strike hundreds of miles away, nor the garbled chatter of a trucker bleeding over from a CB channel. This was clean, precise, a series of clicks and a low, resonant hum, repeating in a perfect 7-second loop. Leo's breath hitched. He fine-tuned the receiver, his fingers dancing over the knobs with practiced grace. The signal sharpened. The clicks were complex, almost like consonants, but they belonged to no alphabet he knew. The hum beneath them was the most unsettling part. It felt ancient, a deep-throated vibration that seemed to settle in his sternum. It was a pattern, but it was not a language. Not human, anyway. For 3 nights, he recorded it, logged its frequency, and mapped its unvarying rhythm. He ran it through every decryption software he owned, from basic Morse decoders to military-grade signal analysis programs. Every test came back with the same result: unknown, non-random, structured. He called Chloe. Chloe, a network engineer with a mind for logic that made Leo's chaotic creativity seem childish, was the anchor of their 2-person radio club. She received the file, and her teasing silence was replaced by a thoughtful hum. "Okay, that's weird," she admitted 20 minutes later. "The waveform is too clean for a natural phenomenon, and the repetition is perfect, no drift at all. It's artificial. But the modulation, it's like nothing I've ever seen." For a week, they worked on it together, sharing their screen and late-night video calls. They charted the clicks, analyzed the frequency of the hum. They proved it wasn't a satellite, not a numbers station, not a commercial broadcast glitch. It was a ghost, a signal from nowhere. "We're missing something," Chloe said, rubbing her tired eyes. "This isn't an engineering problem anymore. It's a language problem, and we're tone deaf." "I know a guy. Well, I know of a guy." Dr. Alastair Finch was a name spoken in cautionary whispers in academic circles. A brilliant linguist who had once been the rising star of his university, his career had imploded spectacularly. His obsession with a theoretical universal proto-language, a single mother tongue from which all human communication evolved, had led him down a path of academic heresy. He'd fabricated data to support his wild theories, and when exposed, he hadn't just been fired, he'd been excommunicated. He now lived as a recluse on the outskirts of town. They found him in a house that smelled of decaying paper and stale tea. Books were stacked in precarious towers that reached the ceiling, leaving only narrow canyons to walk through. Finch himself was a wreck of a man, thin and gaunt, with wild gray hair and eyes that burned with a feverish, paranoid intelligence. He listened to their story with undisguised contempt. "Amateur hour.
You found a microwave oven interfering with a baby monitor, and you think you've discovered Atlantis. Just listen to it, Chloe pleaded, pushing a laptop onto a small, clear patch of his desk. She played the recording. The clean, alien pattern filled the dusty room. The clicks echoed off the walls of books. The low hum vibrated through the floorboards. Finch froze. His sneer evaporated, replaced by an unnerving stillness. He leaned closer, his ear almost touching the speaker, his eyes shut tight. He listened to the loop play through 10, 15, 20 times. The clicks are not phonemes, he whispered, his voice raspy. They are not words. They are ordinal markers. He opened his eyes, and the fire in them was startling. And the hum? My God, the hum is the bass. It's not language. It's mathematics. A counting system. For the next 48 hours, they worked out of Finch's chaotic study. Fueled by coffee and a terrifying shared obsession, the disgraced academic became a man possessed. He scrawled on whiteboards, covered pages in frantic calculations, and muttered to himself about base 12 systems and prime number sequences. Leo and Chloe could only watch, feeding him data and trying to keep up with his frantic leaps of logic. Finally, he stumbled back from a board covered in symbols that looked like a madman's geometry. "It's a clock," Finch rasped, his face pale. "It's not transmitting a message. It's a temporal beacon, a countdown." A cold dread, far deeper than the initial unease, settled over Leo. A countdown to what? "I don't know," Finch said, his hands shaking as he pointed to a string of numbers. "Based on the decay rate of the primary isotope it's using as a power signature, which is brilliant, by the way, absolutely brilliant, the broadcast began 57 years ago. And it's counting down to 0. Chloe's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Based on your math, when is 0? Finch looked at her, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed to eclipse his earlier excitement. 4 days from now, Friday, at 10:38 p.m., Coordinated Universal Time." The silence that followed was heavier than any static. 4 days. They had stumbled onto a 57-year-long countdown that was about to end. "We have to find the source," Chloe said, her voice regaining its professional calm, a fragile shield against the rising panic. "Leo, the signal is constant. No Doppler shift. That means it's terrestrial. Can we get a fix?" "It's faint, but it never stops. With a synchronized receiver array, yes, we can triangulate it." It took them another precious day. Chloe set up a remote receiver at her apartment, syncing it with Leo's gear at Finch's house. They used a third, public access university radio telescope as their final point. The lines on their digital map slowly converged, crossing over each other in a patch of rural farmland about 30 miles east of Oak Haven. The intersection point wasn't a military base or a research facility. It was a single, unassuming dot on the map, labeled with a property address. "A farmhouse," Leo breathed, staring at the satellite image. A simple 2-story white house with a sagging porch, a red barn, and a rusted silo. It looked like 1,000 other forgotten properties slowly decaying in the heartland. "A doomsday cult," Finch declared, his paranoia now fully ignited. "It has to be. Isolated, waiting for their moment. This signal is their call to ascension or mass suicide. We've found their prophet." The theory felt plausible, almost comforting in its familiar insanity. It was a narrative they could understand. The drive out to the farmhouse was thick with a tense, unspoken agreement they would observe, report what they found to the police, and let the authorities handle the potential cultists. They parked their car half a mile down the road and approached on foot as dusk bled purple and orange across the sky. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and distant wood smoke. The farmhouse was even more decrepit up close. Paint peeled from the clapboard siding like sunburnt skin. Windows were dark and empty eyes. There were no cars, no lights, no signs of life. "Nobody's home," Chloe whispered, a statement of both fact and hope.
The signal is strongest here, Leo confirmed, looking at a handheld spectrum analyzer. The needle was pegged. It's coming from inside.
Against their better judgment, driven by the ticking clock that now lived in their heads, they found a side door unlocked. It creaked open into a mudroom that led to a kitchen. The house was cold and musty, but it wasn't abandoned. The counters were clean. A single, plain wooden chair was set at a simple table. But it was the living room that stopped them cold. There was no furniture, no television, no couch, no family photos. The room had been gutted, and in its place stood humming server racks, their blinking green and blue lights casting an eerie glow on the floral wallpaper. Thick black cables snaked across the floor, all converging on a central broadcasting unit that pulsed with a soft amber light. "This isn't a cult," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "This is a relay station." Finch, however, was drawn to a series of metal filing cabinets against the far wall. They were unlocked. He pulled one open. It wasn't filled with religious texts or prophecies. It was filled with thick manila folders. He took one out and opened it on the floor. Inside was a map of the Oak Haven City Water Treatment Plant, detailed blueprints of its filtration systems, and a chemical formula. There was also a photograph of a man in a janitor's uniform, smiling blandly at the camera. His name was typed neatly at the bottom: Daniel Peterson. Leo opened another cabinet, folders for a dozen other cities: Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles. Each contained blueprints for critical infrastructure, a power grid substation, a major airport's control tower, a railway hub. Each had a photograph of a shockingly ordinary-looking person: a school teacher, a dental hygienist, an accountant. "They're not waiting to be saved," Finch said, his voice a horrified whisper as he looked at the sheer number of files. "They're waiting for an order." The realization crashed over them with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a doomsday cult preparing to leave the world. This was a network, a sleeper cell. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people embedded in society, living normal lives, waiting. And the signal wasn't their gospel, it was their activation key.
The countdown wasn't for an event, it was for them. "It's a dead man's switch," Chloe said, her mind piecing it together with chilling speed. "Whoever set this up 57 years ago, they're gone, but the plan remains. The signal continues. When it stops, they wake up." They had less than 3 hours. Panic set in, a frantic, useless energy. They had to stop it. They tore at the broadcast unit, trying to find a power switch, a main breaker. But the machine was a seamless, alien block of metal, fed by a thick, armored cable that disappeared through the floor into the earth below. There was no off switch. "The silo!" Leo yelled, a sudden, desperate thought striking him. "The antenna must be in the silo!" They burst out of the house and ran towards the towering, rust-red cylinder. The metal door at its base was bolted shut, but Leo found a rusty crowbar in the barn, and with their combined strength, they managed to pry it open with a screech of protesting metal. Inside, the silo was a hollow tube that soared into the darkness above. A single, thick cable, the same one from the house, ran up the curved wall, climbing towards the roof. "We cut it," Chloe said, panting. "We just have to cut the cable." "With what?" Leo shot back, his voice cracking. The crowbar was useless. Finch, who had followed them out, simply pointed. Bolted to the wall was a maintenance ladder, and next to it, a heavy-duty emergency axe in a glass case. Leo didn't hesitate. He shattered the glass with the crowbar, grabbed the axe, and started climbing. his heart hammering against his ribs in a rhythm that matched the terrifying signal in his mind. The rungs of the ladder were cold and slick with condensation. He didn't dare look down. He could hear Chloe and Finch shouting encouragement from below, their voices small and distant.
He finally reached the top, his muscles screaming in protest. He was just below the silo's conical roof. Here, the cable fed into a complex transmission dish that pointed straight up at the sky, a metal flower waiting to bloom. He could feel the hum of the signal vibrating through the metal structure, a malevolent energy that made his teeth ache. He checked his watch. 10 minutes. He wedged himself between the ladder and the wall, took a deep breath, and swung the axe. The impact jarred his entire body, a painful shock that ran up his arms. The axe bit into the cable's thick rubber sheath, but didn't sever it. Sparks rained down into the darkness. He swung again, and again. Each blow was a desperate prayer. Metal strands inside the cable began to snap with loud cracks. He could feel the energy surge around him. Below, Chloe was looking at her phone, her face illuminated by the screen. "Leo, 2 minutes!" He put every ounce of his remaining strength into one final ragged swing. The axe head crunched through the last of the copper wiring. The hum stopped. The sudden, absolute silence was more shocking than the noise had been. The vibration ceased. The oppressive energy that had filled the silo for over half a century was gone. Leo hung on the ladder, gasping for air, a triumphant, hysterical laugh bubbling in his throat. They had done it. He scrambled back down the ladder, his legs shaking uncontrollably. He stumbled out of the silo into the arms of a sobbing Chloe. Finch stood nearby, looking up at the sky as if expecting it to fall. "It's over," Leo gasped. "We did it."
Chloe checked the time on her phone again. 10:38 p.m. UTC. 0 hour. For a moment, nothing happened. The peaceful night sounds of the countryside returned. The chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind in the dry grass. They had won. The world was safe. Then, from the direction of the farmhouse, a single light flickered on in an upstairs window. A moment later, the front door of the house opened. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the dim light from within. It was a man of average height and build, dressed in simple, dark clothes. He stood on the porch for a moment, his head cocked as if listening to a sound they couldn't hear. Then he began to walk, not towards them, but towards the road, his pace steady and purposeful. "Who the hell is that?" Chloe whispered, shrinking back. "There was someone here the whole time," Finch breathed, his face a mask of horror. They had been wrong, so terribly fundamentally wrong. They thought the signal was the command, a continuous broadcast that needed to be maintained. But the signal wasn't the command. It was the leash. The 57-year broadcast was the tranquilizer, the hypnotic lullaby that kept the network dormant. By cutting it, they hadn't saved the world. They hadn't stopped the activation. They had triggered it. As the lone figure disappeared into the darkness, Leo's phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Then another, and another. Chloe's phone began to buzz too. From the open door of their car, parked half a mile away, they could hear the faint sound of a radio news bulletin, the announcer's voice fast and panicked. Finch slowly raised a trembling hand and pointed towards the distant glow of Oak Haven on the horizon. A single siren began to wail. It was joined by another, and then another, until the night was filled with a rising chorus of screams, a symphony of a world that had just woken up to its own ending. They stood frozen in the silent farmland, 3 terrified architects of the apocalypse, listening to the new signal that they had just unleashed. Thank you for tuning in. We hope the signal left you with a lingering sense of dread. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Until next time, be careful what you listen for in the static.